The cabin smelled of freshly brewed coffee, but in the next instant, that comforting aroma turned bitter. A scalding stream splashed across the small arms of an 8-year-old boy, his startled cry cutting through the steady hum of the plane's engines. Passengers gasped. The man holding the cup didn't look apologetic. He looked satisfied. For a moment, the boy froze, too shocked to react. But the flight attendant standing 3 rows back had seen every deliberate movement. She wasn't just there to serve drinks and smiles. In seconds, she would show everyone exactly what it meant to defend a passenger's dignity. Ethan was no stranger to flying. His father's work often took them across continents, and today's trip from New York to London was supposed to be another routine journey. At just 8 years old, Ethan carried himself with a quiet maturity, the kind that came from years of being polite, well-mannered, and taught to respect others. His seat was by the window in first class, a gift from his father for always being patient on these long flights. The cabin was calm, filled with the soft rustle of newspapers and the occasional clink of cutlery. Passengers were settling into their comfort, the crew moving gracefully between aisles. 2 rows ahead sat a man in an expensive suit. His shoes gleamed under the dim cabin lights, but his expression was cold and calculating. Throughout boarding, he had glanced at Ethan more than once, his eyes narrowing as if the child's presence in first class was an offense. Ethan didn't notice. His gaze was fixed on the sky outside, watching clouds drift like slow-moving ships. The flight attendant assigned to their section, Marissa, had been with the airline for over a decade. She knew every subtle shift in passenger behavior, every smile, every frown, every brewing problem before it spilled over. And she had already noticed the man's tight jaw and darting eyes. What no one knew was that this flight would become a silent battleground. One careless, or perhaps not so careless, action would ignite, a chain of events that exposed more than bad manners. It would reveal the deep, ugly undercurrent of prejudice that still lingered, even at 35,000 feet. Midway through the flight, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, signaling that meal service was about to begin. Marissa moved down the aisle with her practiced smile, offering drinks. Ethan politely asked for apple juice, his small hands folded neatly in his lap. The man in the suit ordered black coffee, extra hot. His tone was clipped, his eyes briefly flicking toward Ethan before settling back on Marissa. She didn't like the look in them, a strange mix of disdain and superiority, but she carried on, setting the cup on his tray. Moments later, as Ethan leaned forward to take his drink from Marissa, the man stood abruptly. His coffee cup tilted in his hand, and before anyone could react, the contents poured in a deliberate arc across Ethan's arm and lap. The boy's sharp gasp broke the calm. Liquid seeped into his shirt, his eyes filling with tears from the sudden burn. The man muttered something under his breath, something Marissa caught just enough of to know it wasn't an accident. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A woman across the aisle clapped a hand over her mouth. Ethan's hands hovered over the wet fabric, unsure whether to wipe or hold still. Marissa's heartbeat quickened, but her voice remained steady as she crouched beside him, dabbing at his sleeve with a cloth. The man sat down again, almost smug. He didn't offer help. He didn't apologize. Instead, he adjusted his cufflinks and reached for his phone. As if the incident hadn't happened, Marissa's mind was already racing. She had handled medical emergencies, unruly passengers, and even mid-air turbulence that sent trays flying. But this was different. This was targeted cruelty, and she wasn't going to let it slide. Her eyes met the pursers at the far end of the cabin. A silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't just a mess to clean up. It was a moment to stand. For what was right, Marissa quietly approached the captain's phone line. She knew the airline's protocol, serious. Passenger misconduct could mean diversion, investigation, and, in certain cases, permanent bans. And the man in 2A had just crossed a line that no one should. The captain's voice didn't come over the public intercom. Instead, an announcement lit up in the crew's private channel. Secure 2A. We're initiating immediate action. Within minutes, 2 uniformed members of the flight security team, who usually blended unnoticed among passengers, rose from their seats. The man in the suit barely looked up from his phone as they stopped beside him. "Sir, you need to come with us," one said quietly. He laughed, a low, dismissive chuckle. "For what? Spilling a little coffee?" But when one of the officers leaned in and whispered something, likely the word assault, the color drained from his face. The smugness evaporated. Still, he stood slowly, gathering his belongings with deliberate slowness, as if trying to reclaim some control. Passengers watched in tense silence as he was escorted toward the rear of the aircraft. Passengers watched in tense silence as he was escorted toward the rear of the aircraft. Some shook their heads. Others whispered to each other. Ethan, still in his seat, looked confused, but calmer now, Marissa's reassuring presence steadying him. The cabin felt different now, tighter, as though the air itself was holding its breath. Everyone had just witnessed something more than a safety protocol. They had seen prejudice confronted in real time, with no room for excuses or misunderstandings. When the plane landed in London, uniformed authorities were waiting at the gate. The man from 2A was escorted off first, away from the terminal's public areas. Passengers filed out quietly, some offering Ethan a kind smile or a gentle pat on the shoulder. Marissa stayed by his side until his father arrived, a tall, composed man whose eyes softened when they landed on his son, but hardened when they took in the damp stain on his shirt. Later, word spread that the passenger in 2A had been banned from flying with the airline indefinitely, his elite status revoked and his privileges gone. Some whispered that his employer, a major corporation, had been informed, and disciplinary action was already in motion. For Ethan, the memory of the coffee's sting would fade, but the moment's lesson would remain. It was proof that even in enclosed, pressurized spaces where you couldn't simply walk away, injustice could still be met with swift, decisive action. And for every passenger who had watched in silence, perhaps it was a reminder. Doing nothing is easy, but standing up even at 35,000 feet can change the ending of someone's story, because sometimes the true turbulence on a flight isn't the shaking of the plane, it's the shaking of our conscience.